What's up, it's Brandon here. Today we're going to be doing a review on the much awaited Crate Original Custom Ride System frames, or the CRS frames for short. Here's the pretty box they come in. If you don't know about these frames, we first heard about them way back in like 2015, maybe 2014. What they were is essentially the first ever well-designed suspension frame. And the reason they're so much better than all the other ones is they, instead of putting the suspension on like two of the wheels or on just the frame, they put the suspension on every single individual wheel and each side of the axle. So you can see each axle for each wheel is sitting on a piece of urethane. This makes each wheel suspension move independently from each other. And that way, if you're rolling over like tiles or anything, every wheel should slowly like cushion each bump of the tiles, which is a super good idea, and it's by far the best suspension frame design I've seen yet. Before I get into my review on it though, I want to talk about the history of these frames because I feel like a lot of people don't know about it, and it's a very good story. Let's jump right into it. So if you didn't know, CRS frames were a Kickstarter project back in like 2014. It was very successful. They had a lot of pros back then, of course, because it was Crate Original. They already made the sick OG frame. I skated it, everyone skated it, they were beautiful. When I first saw them, there was these sick promo videos going around. They had like Alex Brosco riding them, riding through tiles. They're all talking about how it completely changed the feeling of skating and how like carving and everything just felt so much better on these frames.
So you can definitely turn a lot sharper, that's for sure. It's going to be like fun finding what exactly works for how you skate. Everybody's going to be different.
Which like hyped me up so much, sounded amazing. At the time I wasn't able to back the Kickstarter because I didn't have a job at the time. I was quite young. I was really trying to get a job and I couldn't. So I was pretty gutted I couldn't back it, but one of my friends did. And then it kind of just fell off the face of the earth and I didn't hear anything about it. I full on forgot about it because I didn't see anything. I didn't even see any like of the OG frames. And that's because Crate Original dropped the OG frames to put all their focus onto making these new frames. And here's where we get into the juicy part. All this information can be found on their Kickstarter page and the updates. It's a very good story, I highly recommend reading it. But anyway, the best move they could do was getting the same manufacturer they used to make the OG frames to make these frames. But this manufacturer sounded like absolutely horrible. They ran into quite a few problems. There's about, from what I can see, there's like at least 3 times where they're about to send the frames out to the backers before they found some crucial errors with how the manufacturers made the frames. If you want more detail about that, you should read it. The dudes behind Crate Original, they emailed the manufacturers telling them about these problems, and they were really terrible at replying. They took weeks to reply most of the time, and it was very hard for them to get them to fix the problems they made. They managed to get them to fix one of the hardware problems they ran into after heaps of like hassling by the sounds of it. And even though Crate Original was paid to get a coating on the bolts so that they didn't rust so quick, the manufacturer didn't put it on because they're making it out of their expense. Crate Original was at the stage where they felt they were taking too long to make these frames, so they were saying they're still going to get the frames out, just advising that you put some oil on the bolts so they don't rust as quick. But that's not even the worst part. After that, they noticed that the frames were warping and being about a millimeter off, one side being too long, and this is all because the manufacturer was rushing it and doing bad plastic cooling techniques. Now at this stage, this was one of the many problems they had with the manufacturer, so they didn't want to wait another month to get these people to remake these frames at their expense for them. So instead what they wanted to do was completely cut ties with this manufacturer and start something new. But the problem they had is that the manufacturer had the molds for the frames, and there's a very high chance that they could just take them and never give them back. So they came up with this genius idea. They tricked the manufacturer into giving the molds back. How they did this was they sent an email to them saying they got great news that someone wants to buy out their patent for Crate Originals, but they need the 2 molds, which is the OG mold and the new mold, so that could look into making 2 more, something like that. You should read it, of course, I'm summarizing. They even had one of their friends chuck an email into, pretending to be the buyer, and the manufacturer emailed back straight away, which is ridiculous because they took weeks before apparently, and they fell for it straight away. They sent these molds to the US to Crate Original, and it cost them like $7,000 or something, but they got it. they got the molds back somehow. At this stage they became the first rollerblading company to manufacture in the US. They got a US manufacturer that was meeting their requirements and to a very high standard and doing a much better job and delivering their frames to a much better quality that they are much happier with. But at this stage they had completely run out of the backing money and their own money for the second time by the sounds of it. So there was no way for them to get the frames to the backers at that stage. So the poor backers went from just about to get their frames to their frames can't even be made. So what they did is they got enough money together just to start making the OG frame again. And they used the OG frame to raise money to make the CRS frame, and that's where we are today. The CRS frames are available. It's a pretty good story. I'm very impressed with Crate Originals for not giving up on this. I feel like a lot of other Kickstarters, when they run into problems like this, they just quit. But Crate Originals got the job done. And I know it probably wasn't up to the standard they want in the end because of the money problem, but they got it done, and I'm super impressed with them for that. Absolutely hyped. So Crate Originals should definitely earn some respect from us. So shout out to them, as I always say. Anyway, on to my review now. I have my first impressions. Before I get into it again, I just want to let you know that when I got these frames, it's also the first time I ever skated flat, so that's probably going to change my opinion, as well as the first time skating them skates, of course. So a few of these things may be to do with the fact that I just changed literally everything about how I skated before I jumped on them. But anyway, let's move into the pros that I found for these frames. First pros, they look pretty great. The design definitely changed from the Kickstarter. I kind of like the Kickstarter design better. All the hardware is very good. It doesn't round. It's much better than the Kaiser ones that I used to have. It doesn't seem to get loose either. It's very high quality. Another pro is all the wheels are rockerable up and down, and all the suspension actually is changeable as well. It comes in 3 different softness. There's a soft to rigid, and rigid is just metal in there, so it has no budging at all. It leaves you a lot of options of stuff to do. You can say you can do like soft suspension on the front and back, and then a harder suspension that's also rocketed in the middle. That way, like, you could only have those wheels hitting when you've really like hit the ground hard. Just there's a million different options, which is amazing. It's my first time skating flat, and these frames have been absolutely amazing for it. The groove lines up very well, the groove's fast, the plastic's fast and high quality, and it's got pretty good wheel gripping guard, you know? I mean, I do get a lot of wheel grip, it's flat skating, but it's not like super hard to not get wheel grip. Wheel bite, sorry. Another pro about it is that the suspension isn't hugely noticeable, so when you put it on, it's not like a whoa, this is so different. It's like, it's a quick adjust, which is good, and that's about all the pros I can find about it. Moving on to the cons though. Biggest con of all is they're very expensive. It's understandable with the road that they've come to get to where they are today, and the fact that there's so many parts in them. They are a very expensive frame to make, so it does make sense, but it does make them very unobtainable. Kind of broke the bank for me. It was quite a big risk, because if they weren't good, I was really screwed. I couldn't afford to buy more. This is how much they cost. There was also no notes that came with the frames telling you what each color of the suspension means, which is a big problem for me because I had to guess which one was soft. I figured I'd try soft first, because if soft's too soft then I can go harder, but if hard's too hard I won't really know. But I had to guess, there's nowhere. I googled it, I couldn't find anything. On the Kickstarter page today I did find a user guide, and even that didn't say anything. It's really weird. Keep in mind I did buy these from Roller Warehouse, not straight from them, so maybe something was missing. But that was very annoying. I assume the white is soft. Let's just hope I'm right. Another con is, I know this was a pro as well, but the change isn't hugely noticeable. You don't notice the suspension, and you kind of want to notice it when you're spending this much money. I mean, I could be riding the rigid ones, but I feel like I've felt the squishiness of each one, and this white one seemed the most squishy. That makes sense. When I first put these on, they felt just like normal frames. I've heard that you do notice it once you change back to a normal frame, and I haven't done that. But for that price point, I want to be noticing the suspension, you know? So it's a good and a bad point. Quick adjusts, but you don't notice it, you know? Another one of the worst parts about these frames is the fact that they just always sound loose. I've set these up with like everything brand new, and instantly they sounded clacky and like they're like 100 years old, and like all my bolts are loose. I looked it up and other people had similar problems. All the wheels have a little bit of movement, and it sounds horrible. Sometimes they sound solid and like you stomp a trick and it's like that nice stomp sound, but most of the time you're just walking around and it's like clack, 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 you know, and it makes me think I've got like loose bolts or something, but I've tightened all these to like as tight as they can go, and it's very disappointing. It makes skate feel cheap, and no one wants to feel like they're skating cheap skates when they spent this much on them, you know. A high-end frame with this much should not feel cheap. The hardware is good, but there's some weird things. I did see this in the user manual. It said how to fix these. It said to check all these different parts, but that's easier said than done. But some of the bolts seem to be just a millimeter too big, and they kind of move a little bit side to side, no matter how much you tighten them. Don't know if you can see this, but you should be able to hear it. The bolts can move side to side, even though it's as tight as it can go. But moving on from that point, the overall biggest con about these frames that I've had by far is how hard they were to set up. It's like the biggest nightmare I've ever had setting skates up. It took all day for me to set these up. They were brand new wheels, everything. First off, the wheels just would not fit in. You have to like smash them in, especially these ones. Like really smash them in. Second off, all the urethane suspension things, they don't go in very easily. You can get a little trick to it after a while, but it's definitely hard. That's understandable though, because you know, if they fit in too easy, then they're going to be loose, right? But they are loose, that's the thing. Secondly, the bolts just would not go through my wheels. That might not be the frame's fault, could be like the bearing spacer or something, but it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in frames. Like usually when you're putting your bolts into your wheels, the hardest part is getting it through the spacer in the middle. But on these ones, every bit was hard. Getting it into the first bit of the bearing, getting it through the spacer was almost impossible, and then you'd get stuck on the last bearing, which I've never had happen before. And even then, once you got through the last bearing, you had to get back into the frame, and that was just as hard. It was every single wheel took so long, and it was horrible. Because of this, I do not want to take any of my wheels off or any of the bolts off to try any of the other softness suspension parts to these frames, which means I can't do a very good review, and it's just ridiculous. One of my second day skating these skates, I was at the park and the frame got loose, probably because I didn't tighten it enough, and at the time I didn't realize you could get to it with a ball and Allen key, so I had to take one of these wheels out, and I was at an indoor skate park I had to pay to be in, and it was a pay for 3 hour kind of thing, and I had to spend a good half an hour of it trying to smash this wheel back in, and it was so frustrating. You can see it here, but holy crap, it shouldn't be that hard. I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't know if it's the hardware or the wheels, but it should never be that hard to set up a frame. Moving on to my thoughts about these frames. When Adios came out by Alex Brosco, I thought he was riding these frames, and I was like, oh, that means they must be good. But then once I really looked at it, he was not riding them. He was riding the new Crate originals. And the fact that Brosco wasn't riding them and he didn't really ride them for very long is a good sign that they're not that good. That he didn't like something about them, you know, if the pro's not riding them. I am super glad that Crate Originals took the risk to make these frames and they didn't give up on them and they made them a reality. I'm glad they're here today. I'm glad Crate Originals survived it as well, because I know they were almost gone forever, and I'm glad it didn't take them under. Super appreciate them trying to innovate the skate scene. I just feel like these, like they said, they couldn't quite get it to how they would like it, which means they are kind of subpar for the price at the moment. So honestly, I have to say I do not recommend these frames at all. For the price point, they definitely are not worth it. When you're spending that much money, you don't want a frame that feels this cheap. And by saying it feels cheap, I don't mean like the plastic's bad or anything. Just the fact that all the bolts are loose and all the bolts move and it just sounds so clacky, makes it feel old and cheap to me in that kind of way. So I don't know if there's any way to fix that, but or if it's even just the way I set it up. Maybe I damaged something trying to smash them together the way I did. But I do not recommend them. The design is a very good idea. It's the best idea for suspension anyone has came up with. Whoever came up with it is a genius. It's very smart. The execution though is close, but I think they just missed the ball. If they weren't clacky, they'd be so much better. These frames will make any skate feel clacky and broken, which is very negative. I think if things were different, they weren't so screwed by the manufacturer, these could have been amazing. So it's kind of just fate they didn't work out too well. but like I said, I do not recommend them. So this isn't the only bad experience I've had with Crate Originals too. Back when I was 17, I was filming for this street part. I was just skating a handrail and I landed and snapped a frame that I brought about 3 months ago in half, which is so bad. I never had that happen before, but I do still absolutely love Crate Original. They're a great company, and I do still highly recommend the old frames, the OG ones that they're now making in America. I skated them for a while, and they are a great frame. They slide amazing. Alex Brosco's riding them, so they're obviously a really good frame. You can customize the look too, so definitely check it out. Anyway, that's it for this review. I will possibly do a follow-up one later on if I ever manage to get any more different kind of spaces in there, or if I change frames so I can compare. Otherwise, I hope you liked learning about the history of these frames and my insight on them. Thank you guys so much for watching again. I am doing a giveaway at the moment. If you want to get some free little skate socks, check the link in the description. Little competition going on, pretty easy to win, so you should enter. Anyway, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.